Today, religious groups continue their efforts to deny medical care or beat children under the excuse of imposing so-called Bible discipline. Child Incorporated, Children's Health Care is a Legal Duty, leads the fight to defend young people against religion-based neglect and exploitation. Please welcome physician and children's rights activist and CARE board member, Dr. Seth.
It's been a lifelong ambition to open for a rock band. So 7 more minutes till Overlord, just bear with me. I have a more sober topic, though, to talk to you about today. As a pediatrician, I spent the majority of my career caring for critically ill infants and children. And I'm here today to tell you about some folks who, in the name of their religion, allow their children to die without the benefit of modern medical care. And the government whose policies lead to failure to provide children with the equal protection of the law. Now, despite the opening words of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, our government seems bound and determined to play a role in religious affairs, sometimes at the expense of taxpayers, but unfortunately more often at the expense or at the detriment of innocent children. If you were a Medicare recipient and you needed custodial care for non-medical reasons, you're on your own. But if you're a Christian Scientist, the Medicare Act authorizes payment for you for your housing and care in a government-defined religious, non-medical health care facility. This is a code word. Boo is right. It's a code for a Christian Science nursing home. There is no other facility to ever lay claim to these Medicaid dollars as a non-medical health care facility. These are places where the medical or the non-medical health care that's offered is prayer. The so-called nurses there won't take a pulse or a temperature or call for a doctor, but they will call for a practitioner to pray. In fact, they require that you enroll the services of a fee-for-service Christian Science prayer provider in order to be a resident. These sanatoria bill the government to the tune of $8 to $10 million a year. Now, despite protests and lawsuits from healthcare advocates and taxpayers, such weird bedfellows as Orrin Hatch and Ted Kennedy, steadfastly promote this authorization in the Medicare Act. Now, while it's troubling that we all have to pay for these pseudo-professionals to ignore the medical needs of adults, at least presumably they're making their own health care decisions. It's a different situation, however, for children who are too young to decide for themselves. In 1974, the federal government mandated that states that receive grant money from the Child Abuse and Prevention and Treatment Act have laws that would exempt parents from child abuse charges under state laws if instead they relied on spiritual treatment in lieu of medical care. Since that time, over nearly 300 deaths of children of Christian Scientists and fundamentalist faith healing groups have been well documented, and there are many more that are outside of public view. These children die slow, agonizing, and painful deaths from such easily treatable or preventable conditions as appendicitis, pneumonia, measles, asthma, or diabetes. Shante Walker was a 4-year-old young lady in California who died in 1984 from untreated meningitis. She had not received any vaccinations, but the family dog was fully immunized. The law required it for the dog, but not for the child. We live in a country where the laws that protect pets are stronger than the laws that protect children. Ashley King died at age 12 from bone cancer in Arizona. Because her parents neglected her medical needs for so long beyond the time medical care would have been effective, a judge allowed her to be placed in a Christian Science sanatorium to live out her last few weeks. There she screamed in pain, and rather than getting her painkillers or a doctor, her Christian Science nurse scolded her, telling her that her pain wasn't real and she was disturbing the other residents. Without the aid of trained assistance during childbirth, many dozens of what would have been otherwise healthy newborns have died during deliveries. Several of their mothers also died needlessly. In addition to those who've died, many more have experienced needless pain and suffering and have been permanently disabled from this form of medical neglect. A few, but not very many of these children have received some media attention And in the 1980s, the federal government removed their mandate for religious exemption laws in the state codes. However, with the exception of a very few states in which some well-publicized deaths occurred, most states still have religious exemption laws that protect parents in faith-healing groups. The message to these faith healers is clear. Your dangerous and deadly behavior is acceptable. Now, to add insult to injury, in 1996, at the urging of Christian Science lobbyists, the Congress passed legislation that specifically enables the states to have religious exemption laws. Although more than 25 national children's interest organizations called upon Congress to repeal the exemption, Congress has chosen to retain it, and a House staffer told me that the 5 Christian Science congressmen demanded that it be kept. This is hardly the separation of church and state that the founders intended. The government specifically endorsing a form of religious practice that has predictable and very tragic consequences. This is human sacrifice in the name of religion. What can you do about this outrage? If you neglected your children like this, you would go to jail. When faith healers do this, they typically get away with it. If you're from a state, as most of us are, that has religious exemptions, go back and tell your legislators to repeal them. Make teachers and others in your community who deal with children aware that they must report ill children to child protection authorities while there is still time to help them. You can write to me in care of Ellen. I know she doesn't have enough to do, but forward my emails. Or directly at sethasser@aol.com and join me in the fight against this terrible, tragic, and archaic behavior. Thank you very much.